raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness with your hosts John McCaskill and Will Schneider. Here we focus on helping men and those with men in their lives solve some of life's complex challenges through understanding the practices of mindfulness and how they can help. Each episode is in an environment free of judgment and criticism, with a focus on authenticity and inner peace. Let's dig in.
All right. Fear. Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. That's a quote from Will Smith as Cypher Raige in the movie After Earth. Not a great movie, at least in my opinion, but it's a great quote. Welcome back to Men Talking Mindfulness. Thanks for being here. I am John McCaskill, joined by my co-host Will Schneider in New York City. Each week, we work to break down and demystify an aspect of mindfulness and make it meaningful to you. This episode, we're going to become more mindful of fear. We started talking about this a little bit last week in our episode with William Branum. This week, we're going to learn where fear comes from, what you can do to overcome it, and how to use it as a guide to your greatness. But first, I'm going to kick it back over to Will for some announcements. Will.
We're back, John. Awesome. You believe this is episode 10 of season 5, which is, I can't believe
Nuts.
how quickly, this season is already flying by, and I'm really excited to kind of jump into fear today. And I think it'll really be very, very helpful to everyone out there that's listening, because it's something that everyone struggles with. So hopefully we can make it a little more meaningful to you and you can overcome some of those fears. But hey, announcements. We still have some space on our Mindfulness Adventure Retreat in Durango, Colorado, which is September 16th to the 19th. It's coming up quickly. Also included in this retreat, just not these wonderful 4 days together, but we have a 4-week post-retreat integration program to help you get the most out of the experience, allowing you to live more mindfully instead of mindfulness just being an idea. So if you want to learn more, head to mentalkingmindfulness.com/retreat, and all the information's there. And please, if you need to, there's even a spot on the page. You can send us an email if you have some questions, but let us know. We'd love for you to join us, and it's going to be a really great time. And also who's joining us, but not just John and I, but Dr. T, who's been on the show a couple times. All right. So, hey, before we jump into fear, and one thing you might have, if you're regular listeners out there, John and I usually get a little anxious and amped up before the show. Yeah, a little fearful because it also comes from passion, right? We really care about what we're doing here. So we have our little grounding practice, and we're just going to keep it real simple. We're going to do 5 big inhales and exhales in and out to help ground us. So let's go. Close those eyes or keep the eyes open. You can breathe with your eyes open. You're already doing it right now and all day. And let's just ground ourselves for a moment. We'll just start with a nice big exhale out the mouth. Let's take a big giant inhale through the nose. Keep going, inhale. And exhale gently out the mouth. Good. More. Inhale, 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale out slowly. Mindfully controlling that exhale. Again, in 5. Out 5. Couple more. In, big breath. As we exhale, see if you can allow your shoulders to relax down, your face to soften. You can see if you can find a deeper grounding into your feet or your sit bones. And one more time, inhale. And exhale out. And get heavier, 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 and ground yourself into the here and now. And when you're ready, make some little micro movements. Come back, and get ready. Open your ears, open your mind, and let's talk about a little fear, John. Let's do this.
Yeah, well, I know you also had another quote that you wanted to jump into that's kind of helps to lay the foundation for today's episode. So I'll turn it back over to you yet again.
Yeah. So this is from an old school. I mean, it's not super old school. He was around in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s, 80s. Krishnamurti. He says, what is needed rather than running away or controlling or suppressing or any other resistance is understanding fear. That means watch it, learn about it, come directly in contact with it. We are to learn about fear, not how to escape from it. Again, that's Krishnamurti. And I really think that's a great way to start, John, because instead of letting fear control us, running away from fear, resisting it, what if you lean into it, begin to objectify it, begin to use it as a tool, as a guide, as a compass, to understand yourself and on a deeper level and move beyond fear. What's possible, John? And I'm sure, hey, we're going to share a lot of personal stories here as well. And anytime that I've really looked fear in the face, and instead of staying as a spectator in the arena of life, but stepping into the arena and facing, the dragon of my fear, that's when my life really started to change. And it's not just in that moment, which has like a big impact, but that cascading effect, it's just like, oh my God, what else have I been fearing? And instead of, resisting it, leaning into it, and overcoming it. So, awesome.
Well, yeah, I think fear, just like so many of the things that we talk about on the show, there's two sides to it, right? Fear itself is not a bad thing. At least I don't feel that it's a bad thing. Fear itself, it's a natural instinct. It protects us from doing stupid things, right?
Right.
It protects us from, jumping off cliffs, right, without parachutes. And I know you've got a cliff story to tell later, but we're going to talk about, jumping off some ridiculously high cliff without any kind of safety net or safety parachute or whatever. I'm not going to go and fight a bear outside here in Colorado Springs. And in Jaws, the scene that always kind of elicits fears, the beginning of the classic Jaws, there's a young lady and she's swimming naked at night, and the great white shark. We're not going to go swimming naked at night with great white sharks, right? No. Because of fear, and that keeps us alive. It keeps us safe. What about the psychological and emotional sides where fear protects us, right? We're not going to say something that's very hurtful to a loved one, because honestly, there's a little bit of fear there. It may even be a true statement, but sometimes fear keeps you from saying it, which could be a good thing, but it could also be a bad thing. And then, potentially investing in a stock or in some type of investment opportunity that you know nothing about, fear is going to keep you from doing that, which will keep you from losing money. So it can protect you emotionally, physically, financially even. But it's the irrational fear that's the bad side of fear, and the physiological, mental, spiritual, emotional, all those aspects of that irrational fear that we kind of want to talk about today, and how to overcome those, why it's negative for you, what it causes in your body. We're going to go into the science of it. So yeah, let's talk about that irrational fear. That's the fear that is not real, right? So let's jump in on that, man.
Well, let's actually first invite the audience into this conversation. So
let's do it.
Why don't we, hey, everyone out there listening live with us right now, share some of your fears in the comments. Would be a big help to us, because this is just a growing conversation, and John and I are just kind of facilitating this conversation, and we love your input because it just gives us a few more things to work off of. I think what you said earlier, fear isn't good or bad. Thinking makes it so. That's like a little take on Shakespeare. Fear just is. And it's a human experience, and it's very. Fear is important. It's because it kept us. As human beings, as a species, we're here because of those mechanisms of fear. Because we're not, like stupidly fighting the lion or the bear, or just randomly jumping off cliffs. Like there's an important aspect of fear. But what happens when fear becomes so consuming, and it just really becomes like this mental construct that's based on imagination, right? Of like, oh, what will happen if I do this? Or it's from memory in the past because, oh, when I did this happens. But I think what's really important here about fear, number one, to get to know the feelings of fear, right? Like where is that in your body, right? Like, so you can come back. I think it's a really great example of jumping off a cliff. Like, I mean, I definitely like, cliff jumping, but I'm smart. I'm not dumb and just jumping off any random cliff. Like, I go in and I check the depth of the water first, or you know what I mean? Or I've seen many people jump off that same cliff and then come up and survive. Right. So, there is, you have to be calculated here and not just ignorant and stupid. I mean, that's like, that's stupidity. But like, so fear is a good, compass in some way, or not a compass as much as like it's necessary, but in some cases, for our survival, right? But I think what happens when fear is consuming, because we get the anxiety of the unknown, the anxiety of change, the anxiety of learning something new, right? Then that's just, fear isn't, that's when we really need to look at fear and objectify fear, instead of letting fear, like Christian Marty says here, that resistance, right? And stops us and prevents us from doing things. And everyone out there listening, like, just even take a mental inventory or drop it into the notes. It's like, when has fear prevented you from doing something, right? And it's happened to me like many times. So let's get into, those, some of the science of fear. I think would be a great place to start, because it gives us a good baseline. And I like talking from a scientific and research and psychological perspective in this case.
For sure.
Because it's, because we're all human. We all have fears. But then it's like, how do we process fear,
Right. Well, again, coming back to, the raw primal fear that kind of protects us from doing stupid things, or protects us if we are already in a situation that we need to defend ourselves. So coming back to that, the fighting the bear scenario, right? Mm-hmm. What happens if we're fighting this bear? Our amygdala kicks in, that fight, flight, or freeze. That's the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, and that's going to shut down everything else. So, we're not going to be thinking with our prefrontal cortex. That we're going to be thinking about survival. The cerebral cortex becomes impaired. Our heart rate increases so that we get that blood flow, so that we can act quickly. Our respiratory rate increases. The adrenaline kicks in so that we don't feel pain as much, but the rational thought all kind of goes away, right? So when we are feeling fear in a true life or death situation, fear is a good thing. Here again, we're coming back to when fear is a good thing. But we sometimes fear irrational things. An email pops in that we hadn't expected, and it says, new deadline. And that's a threat. We're perceiving it as a threat. And now our body responds the same way. Our heart rate increases, our respiratory rate increases, the prefrontal cortex, the cerebral cortex starts shutting down, and we act irrationally. We start kind of living in a fog. So that's when fear is obviously a bad thing, but that's just some of the science behind it. It's the sympathetic versus parasympathetic nervous system. And we talk about that quite often on the show is how to tap into that parasympathetic nervous system. And that we've done that at the beginning of the show, just a couple minutes ago when Will was leading us through that grounding exercise. We just did some simple breathing. And I watched a great couple of TED Talks yesterday. Cindy Gaddis, one of our fans and friends, sent it to me on LinkedIn.
Nice.
All on how breathing can control your heart rate variability and your heart rate and heart coherence, and how that can really change your perception of what is happening in life. That can change your fear. And it's really fascinating. The guy broke it down into an acronym. He actually broke the word breathe down into an acronym, BREATHE. Breathe. B is for breathe. R is for rhythmic. E is for even. A is for, I forget what A is, but through the heart and every day. Breathe through the heart every day.
Or maybe always through the heart every day. Like,
always,
oh, there you
always through
go.
the heart every
Bingo.
day.
I got,
Yeah,
feel
thank
like I
you.
just won
Yes,
something. All right,
yes,
cool.
you did. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you saved me. You saved me. Thanks, buddy. That's what we're here for. Is for.
I'm listening to you,
I
John.
actually started experiencing fear right then. I was like, oh crap! I put out the fact that I'm going to break down an acronym and I'm going to screw it up. And what happened? My heart rate increased, my hands started sweating, and then I failed. But hey, that's another thing, and we're going to talk about that. Is the forms of fear, and we can go ahead and jump right into that. And one of the biggest things is fear of failure or fear of imperfection. And literally, right then, as I was going through the acronym there, I experienced a little hit of fear. I'm like, I'm going to screw this up. And I had that fear of failure, and it did in fact cause me to screw it up. And that's an interesting thing. But that's an anecdote, sure. But you blow that up into life. Where are we feeling that fear of failure, fear of imperfection? And I'll kick it back over to you, Will.
Well, actually, what's the acronym again? So what is it for breathe? I just want to hear it again.
Breathe. B is for breathe. R is for rhythmic.
Okay.
So
so even breaths, even. So, so creating a pattern of breathing.
Yeah, having a pattern. Then E is for even. So you don't want to have like that kind of all like staggered breathing, that like nice and even. And he in this talk, he talks about, as a rower, when you put the oar in the water, you want to pull nice and evenly. You don't want to pull hard at the beginning, relax in the middle, and then pull hard as you're bringing that oar out of the water.
Smooth strokes. Yeah.
Smooth stroke. A is for always. T is through heart every day. So
through the heart every day. Right. So
day.
connecting, also, so what you said earlier, it's like, we talk, it's mindfulness, right? It's like, so we really always can kind of pinpoint down to reacting versus responding. Right. So it's like, if you're in a reactionary state, right, you're being just continually triggered by the environment around you, or that, that circumstance. And it just, this whole STIA process, right? The thinking, the emotions, the actions, and we're kind of reacting without thinking. Right. Whereas if we use the breath, right, and understand that acronym, and in order to maybe understand that acronym, anyone out there, like maybe you just need to start doing some even breaths and just watch how that drops us down into that, that rest and digest and that calm, cool, and connected self. And we begin to have, we are of our mind. We are in the moment. We're with our body. We're aware of our feelings, but not hijacked by them. But let's get into some of these, I think, irrational fears. So here's the irrational. So we're not thinking clearly, right? We're not processing the world clearly because we're clouded by the emotional response to the circumstance. So where should we start, John?
Well, I mean, we kind of already started the fear of failure and the fear of imperfection. Right. And here in the comments, there's a few folks who've said, fear of failure, public speaking. When you get into public speaking, that's one of the biggest fears out there, is second only to death.
Right.
But yeah, the reason people fear public speaking is tied to that fear of failure and that fear of imperfection, that you may say the wrong thing and that you may look stupid or sound stupid. But you know what? When you come up and show up authentically in your true self, that's when the audience is going to connect with you the best.
We've seen it time and time again on the show.
Exactly.
Right. We're just talking before the show, saying we're going to be called, instead of raw, uncut, unapologetic, just authentic as fuck. Right. AAF. Right. I mean, because it's we had it could be considered from a perfectionist point of view, a messy show last week. Like, I had technical problems, my sound, William dropped off, came back on, like I was in a different place. And then sure enough, it all worked out, and it all worked out exactly the way it should. And I think it's like, because we stayed authentic, because also, John, we're moving through the heart. We're here not to be like, oh, look how perfect. And, I sound right. It doesn't make a freaking difference. Like, it really doesn't. But the more you authentically show up, and when you're living in authenticity, right, you're living more through that heart, you're out of the concept of perfection, right, and what it should look like. We are so much. We live in this society where appearance, right, and that's just not physical appearance, but that's like how the words that I'm using, or how smart I'm sounding, and that just creates it prevents us from being a human being, which is flawed, who is, just has an experience that is always changing, always going to be a little messy.
Right.
And what I've learned, John, like the more that I fall into the mess, lean into the mess, lean into authenticity, things just work out all the time. And like I've taught thousands of classes here in New York, and I learned luckily very early on as a teacher, just by dumb luck or just a pure gift that I was here we go. Here's a fucking example of imperfection. Sitting in one of my first classes or teaching one of my first classes in New York City back in like 2009 or 10. And I have a packed class. It's like a 6 p.m. on like whatever, a Monday. So it's full room, like 50, 60 people in there, sitting down, trying to and I'm really new to teaching, right? So it's different, practicing yoga, but then try to speak to yoga and bring people into a practice is a very, very different experience. So I'm all in my head. I'm feeling all anxious and because I'm kind of hijacked in that sympathetic nervous system. I was like, all right, everybody, let's take a moment and feel our breast. And I was like, oh shit. Right. And so I had this moment, just like you were like, your heart was fluttering, earlier when you forgot always. Right.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God. I was like, what am I going to do? And I had this like 3 or 4 second pause. And all of a sudden I just came out with, I'm like, well, this is going to be a fantastic class. And everybody started laughing. Everybody cracked up. And I learned in that moment, I'm like, oh my God, like, and then people even commented afterwards and then continually, like all these, over the years, like, thank you for not being afraid to screw up, because it gives me the opportunity to be a human being and be authentically as well. Right. And that's like how, we don't know exactly what's going to happen here on the show. That's why we like to do it live. Yeah. But like we've seen time and time again, like the more we lean into vulnerability and authenticity, right? More people show up. The show continually thrives, and actually makes it a hell of a lot more fun. Because I don't know if I'd be able to work with you, John, if you were a and we're perfectionists in the sense of like, let's get everything right, dot all the I's and cross the T's as far as from the technology side, get our notes ready. But when it goes live, it's like we're stepping on into this arena and just trusting our experience, then the preparation, but also what I love too, John, is working, our relationship here in the show. Cause like I got your back and I'm not judging you for what you're saying. I'm only listening and receiving and trying to support you, as well as connected to a higher purpose, which is how can we serve the audience in the best we possibly can.
Right. So, which actually brings up, a pretty interesting thing is you mentioned, hey, I've got your back, and I feel confident that you have my back and vice versa. Always. That like, hey, if I start spurting out an acronym, you're gonna, if you know it, you're gonna help me out with it, or vice versa. Yeah. But the fear of imperfection often causes us to be even more imperfect than we would have without that fear. So if you just realize, hey, you know what, I'm going to go on the show, for instance, or I'm going to go up on stage and I'm going to talk, and I'm not going to be perfect. If you go ahead and set that for yourself, now, sure, you want to strive for doing well, but realize you're not going to be perfect. The lighting may not be perfect. The microphone may not be perfect. What you say may not be perfect. You may stumble over a word here or there. Just roll with it, and you're going to come across more authentic, more confident, and often it's going to come across better than if you go up there and you have this perfect script and you try to stick to that perfect script. I remember, now I got to come back to a pretty vulnerable time. When I was in 8th grade, I went and did this big speech, and I think I may have talked about this on the show before. I did this big speech competition, and I memorized the speech word for word. And if I missed a single word, it was not going to be perfect. And I went up there and I was nailing it. I was like, da 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 da, and I'm like super confident in myself. This is sounding so great. And then I got to the end and I said, "This brings me to my conclusion." And I just froze. I was like, shit, I don't remember what my conclusion is. And I stood up there for like a minute.
Wow.
And like, a good minute in front of this
long
huge
time.
Oh my gosh. It was like, I could feel my heart racing. I could feel myself sweating, and I just froze. And then I just made up some conclusion that lasted, 30 seconds, and I ran to my seat and sat down. It was not the conclusion that I had originally scripted. It was nowhere near what I wanted it to say. But if I had gone up there and realized, hey, you know what? I don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be exactly word for word per the script. I can kind of flex. And that's what I do now. When I public speak, I have a general framework that I talk from, and I feel a lot more confident getting up there and doing it. And because I'm not trying to be perfect, because I know I'm not going to be, because I know I'm not, because I'm a human being, and
Right.
I'm not going to be perfect. So I want to come to a couple of the comments here.
Yeah.
Let's see. One of them is pretty funny. I don't know if this is actually true, but Keith Williams, he says that Thomas Edison was afraid of the dark, so he invented lights. Face your fears. I love that.
Exactly. Lean in, right?
Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
What is it? Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yep. Exactly. People are afraid of what others will think. Absolutely.
I like this. The next one. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. My biggest fear is failing others that are counting on me for their success. Maybe weird way of fearing responsibility. And, it's like, leadership fears. And John, I think you might be able to talk about this, like being the commander that you are and you were. But like, I think it's what I've learned through leadership, and I've had some really great leaders over the years that I've kind of been under their tutelage. But again, coming back to the more authentic, the more not even authentic they are in their presentation or whatever, but the more authentically they connect and heartfully, right, connect with their people, it gives you all the freedom, right, to screw up, right? And I think what's important about leadership and anything, even like you talked about your speech, I was an actor for a number of years, and we prepare, rehearse. And, but one thing, if you really want to be a successful actor and really live in the moment, right, they say before you step on stage, just let it all go and just let it happen. Like, you prepare so much. That's what's important about, I think leadership or anything, like, or preparing for that talk. It's like, I think it's important to have strategy. It's important to be prepared. It's important to get ready, because that's like that's the biggest parts I feel of leadership, is the strategy and the implementation of the plan. And we don't know if the plan's never going to be perfect. Yeah. Never going to be perfect. What's important is adjusting, right, and having the flexibility, to adjust in the moment, in the circumstance. Because if you're a perfectionist, you're going to get easily frustrated. You're going to be yelling at people, and you're going to be jacked up with those, that cortisol and adrenaline and the sympathetic nervous system, and you're just going to be, boom, take yourself right out of the moment, right? And then if you're not living in the moment, you're living in your head. And if you're living in your head, you're just kind of looking for problems and looking for more ways that this is going to potentially fail, instead of using the circumstance, using the time, adjusting to what's going on, and then dealing with the circumstance at hand, because everything is changing all the time.
Right. And I actually had an executive coaching session this week where I was talking about that fear when you take command, or you take a new position at work, right? You get promoted into the position that somebody else held. And there's this imposter syndrome that many of us have. It's like, hey, I'm not going to be good enough. I'm not going to be as good as the person before me. I'm not going to be as good as the person I replaced, or I'm not going to be as good as the next person that replaces me. And so you end up spinning your wheels, driving yourself insane, burning the candle at both ends, trying to, be a perfect leader, answer every single email, do every single thing on your to-do list. And you end up, because you're striving so hard to be perfect, you wear yourself out, and you're actually worse than you would have been in the beginning. So let's talk about some of the other things. Fear of rejection, huge one.
Yeah.
So, and I've spoken about this on the show before too. My wife and I are together because I finally overcame fear. So we're in Afghanistan. Working together. She worked with me at SEAL Team 10. And I'm putting this out publicly now because we're married and we're way past the point of where we can get in trouble for it. But so she worked for me, and I called her up to my office, and, we had been hanging out, for those who are military and have ever been deployed, you end up with little places that you hang out at the coffee shop or by the coffee maker. It's just like any other workplace. You end up having little places that you congregate. We had been hanging out and sharing stories, and I realized that I'd started to develop feelings for her, and I was like, shit, should I tell her? I'm really, honestly, I'm fearful of telling her. I'm fearful of saying something and then her being like, oh, well, yeah, I don't feel the same way.
I know,
And
right? Oh my God.
and I looked at this picture that we had up in the office. And it was a lion. I've actually got a tattoo similar to it on my side. It's a lion, kind of like this, and it says, fortune favors the bold. And I was like, all right, screw it. I'm gonna do it. So I called her up to the office, and I was like, hey, I just got to tell you something. And I told her that I had feelings for her. And there was this like really awkward moment, and I was like, oh shit, I've done it. And she doesn't feel the same way. And then she's like, I feel the same way. And we joke about it now. We joke about it now in that she was like, oh man, I wish I'd known you were going to say something, because I would totally would have been like, oh yeah, I don't feel the same way. Like she would have just been joking. Like it made me feel terrible. But here I am, fast forward 10 years, I'm married to her. I have 3 beautiful children, and I'm very happy in my place in our relationship. And if I had not overcome that fear of rejection, I would have missed it. And Lindsay, our executive assistant in the private chat here on the show, she says, I like you. Do you like me too? Check yes or no. Or I don't know. I think that's an old country song. I can't remember if it's can't remember. Hey, if you remember who sings that, put it in the comments. But yeah, it's a classic country song. And yeah, that's basically what I was doing. I would have passed her a note in class. It said, I like you. Check yes or no if you like me. But yeah, overcoming that rejection and not overcoming that rejection. What do we miss out on? Right? We miss out on potential love. Right? We mentioned
3 kids.
3 kids. Yeah. I would have missed out on 3 kids, which sometimes I'm probably like, oh no, I'm just kidding. I love them.
Well, when you were telling that story, John, just to kind of come back to like, fear lives in memory or imagination. I was watching you because I've got to know you, John, over the years. And when you get nervous or you're kind of like might be a little reluctant to kind of say something, or before you say it, like you kind of roll your tongue on your mouth or something like that. I saw you reliving this fear of like stepping up to the plate and asking out your wife. And it's amazing. Like, I mean, fear, it's a real thing. It's a feeling. And, we can go back into the memory. I'm even just getting kind of a little nervous when you were talking about that circumstance, because reminding me of times that I've kind of put myself out there. And, it
was George Strait. Thanks, folks, for those who are commenting in the comments.
Yeah.
Yes, and I can't believe I missed that. Yes, it was a George Strait classic, and my high school girlfriend would be furious at me for not knowing that, because that was one of my first concerts, was a George Strait concert. But yes, man, the fear of rejection, huge one. Mm-hmm. The flip side of that is the fear of success, right? A lot of the time we go into something, we're like, okay, if I do this, I could be astoundingly successful. Well, what if I do attain that success? What then? And now we have fear of that. Let's unpack that a little bit. Will, you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, I think it's like, the fear of change that kind of comes from the, letting go, like the fear of the unknown. I think it's like we can talk ourselves out of doing things that are meaningful to us because of how comfortable we are with the way things are right now. And by stepping out onto that skinny branch and really, visualizing your success and like, you're not going to, you don't step forward to fail, right? You step forward to succeed, because how that success and all the little dots that are going to connect in order to create that success aren't clear, right? Because, the mind only knows 2 things. Right. The mind knows the future or the past, right. And has no place in the present. And this is why meditation is so important. So we can kind of like begin to objectify, the past and the future. But because the mind, and the experience of the mind and the memory that has developed around the mind doesn't know what it's going to take, or what it's going to look like into the future. and that success, if you are strategic, you got to be smart. I mean, it's just like, dumbly jump off, the cliff, into, rocks or something like that. You got to be chest the waters, coming back to that kind of analogy. It's like, I got to see if it's deep enough, right? Then I got to get to the end. I got to take that leap. It's a leap of faith on yourself, a leap of faith that, you're what you're trying to strive for will be met, by other people, will be accepted by other people, but also kind of rewarded by, the universe, if you will, and the world of being like, oh yeah, I've been waiting for Will Schneider or John McCaskill to show up and take this big step. You know what? Here's a gift. Here's a phone call. Here's an email. Here's a new relationship that's going to help you connect your first dot, on this path to your success. I think that kind of hits a little bit on success, but anything else, John, on that would be, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to understand why you're scared of success, right? So peel back that onion a little bit more. So what is it about success that scares you? Is it the extra work? Is it the extra potential attention? Is it a rational fear of success? If it is rational, then maybe unpack that. Maybe you don't want to be super successful because you don't want to be well known. You just want to kind of glide through life. And if that's what you want to do, no judgment here. There's the beginning of the show it says it's a discussion without judgment. Hey, no judgment. But if you want to be successful, but you still fear it, okay, what is it that you're fearing about it, and understanding that. So it's really not the success itself, it's aspects of that success, and then maybe ways to overcome that. And we're going to talk about that here too. But before we do that, I want to talk about where fear and not overcoming it could actually hurt you greatly. So we talked about the fear of looking or sounding stupid, right? Where you stand up on a stage and you look or sound stupid, but we have speeches, quote unquote, every day, every single day. Whenever we're talking to somebody, there's a fear. It may be much smaller than if you're speaking in front of a large group, but there's a fear every single day that you're speaking with someone of looking stupid, sounding stupid. And one place that we need to make sure we overcome that fear is in the doctor's office, right? Like I'll admit, when I go into the doctor's office, so my wife works in the healthcare field, I go into the doctor's office with her, and it may be some type of checkup for myself, and they instantly turn to her and they start talking medical terms, all the medical terms. I'm like, hey, can you guys stop using the medical terms, because I don't understand what you're talking about. Or if I go in by myself, their fear is even more so. I'm like, well, I don't have anyone to support me. But they're talking to me about this health risk or that health risk. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, sure. And I just march on. Well, is that the safe thing to do? No, it's probably safer to ask a question and quote unquote look stupid. You don't actually look stupid, but you think that you do. Yeah. And then you end up missing out on very important, potentially life-saving information. So that's where, I want to talk about what not overcoming fear can potentially keep you from achieving. Well, it can potentially keep you from achieving better health, or knowing when there's a very critical risk that you need to get addressed.
Yeah, I think that's a friend of mine. She's like, why are men so afraid of going to the doctors?
Yeah.
I mean, like you kind of hit on a few things there as far as like, I don't really want to know what's going on. I honestly don't want my first prostate exam, but I think that's, but I think that's something that's critical, and necessary, because it's like, I'm looking, I want to live, I don't know how long I'm going to live. I mean, it can be over very quickly. But overall, I mean, I see living a long time, and health is very important. And, and if you're a little reluctant, as I say this, I'm like, I need to make an appointment for the doctor, just because, oh my God, I'll be turning 50 this year. I can't believe it. But, just step in the arena. And I think one thing you mentioned earlier too, it's like people love to be asked questions, John, because it makes them feel important.
Yeah.
A lot of times. So just by asking a question, you're like, oh, hey, let me show you how smart I am. Or, or it's like, let me help you.
Let me help you. And we talked about that last week with William, right? By letting someone help you, you're actually helping them, because they feel that sense of accomplishment, and it really is helpful in that sense. So, yeah. What about what else does fear keep us from doing? I know fear can keep us from having a lot of fun, right? Like, maybe in something as silly as, hey, I have a fear of getting on a roller coaster. Well, roller coasters can be fun. They can be scary, but they can be a lot of fun. So maybe you're missing out on something that simple, but maybe you're missing out on something even bigger in your life that's fun. Like myself, coming back to that story, I love my kids, and they are a lot of fun. They're a lot of work, but they're a lot of fun.
Right.
And I'd be missing out on that if I hadn't overcome that. And then I want to talk about where we've already touched on this, but the fear of failure. It's ironic.
Can I come back to just the fear of fun, John, and then we'll talk about failure?
Please,
Is that okay? No. Okay, yeah, no, don't worry about it. No,
Yeah.
I'm with you. So that the fear of fun. Like I've in the past, in the through the yoga world here in New York City, like I've held lots of retreats. I've had over, I don't know, a dozen or more. And sometimes we go international with a group of people and have a lot of fun. And I took a group to Guatemala. It was like March of 2019, and we had a really, really great time. Good group. And Guatemala down on Lake Atitlan is just a beautiful place. It's this crater lake, all these, different cliffs and stuff like that, different places to hike. I mean, the water is really gorgeous. They call it Eden on Earth, and it really is. I mean, it's just a really, really great spot. And so we had a group of, I think it was 10 people, a kind of a good mix, a good different, diverse group of people. And, the one day we went on this, I planned let's go on this hike and we'll have lunch at this place. And then, we'll be able to go swimming. And I think we did some kayaking that day. And there's this one place we're able to do, I think at the time it was like maybe 25 or 30 foot cliff jump. So it was actually off it wasn't like on the rocks and jump into the water, but the built into the rocks was like some sort of plank or some sort of deck. So it was like kind of like, it was an easy jumping off point because it wasn't kind of precarious getting up to the top of the cliff before you jump off. And people have been jumping off this place like many, 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 many times. I've jumped off it because this is like my second retreat at this location, or maybe it was the third or something. Really great spot. And there's this one student that came on the retreat, and she was really, 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 really scared and to jump off the cliff because she's never done anything like this before. And I was like, and, a bunch of us already jumped off, and I was like, hey, you don't have to do this. Like, I mean, I'm supporting her regardless of her decision. I was like, but, you've seen enough of us jump. It's perfectly safe. I was like, and what is on the other side of you jumping off this cliff into the water? Like, what's on the other side? And I just left that question in her head. I was like, you do whatever you want. And I'm here to support you 100% with whatever you choose. And sure enough, she was like meandering back and forth and like kind of pacing, like, oh yeah, I can only imagine what was going on, that conversation in her head. I think we can all imagine what that would be. I was like, oh fuck, oh my God, what's going to happen? And she took the leap, and she jumped in the water, came out of the water. I actually have it on video. And she came out, I was like, oh my God. And she probably jumped like a few more times. And from that day forward, I think it was like an 6-day retreat or something like that. And I think we did this on like the third day. Like the other 3 or 4 days that we had left in the retreat, she just kept knocking over one fear after the other. And you could just literally seeing her transform from that one moment of fear that held her back, that all the resistance in her mind, all that imagination, all the emotions that were coming up, in that particular circumstance were just gone. And then she started to really understand fear as just an imagination, just a memory, just a feeling. And then we came back to the city after the retreat, and I held like a, kind of a post, retreat gathering like a month later. And we kind of checked in with the whole group and just having fun. And she just started talking about how she's dating differently, how she's showing up at work differently and standing up for herself. It changed her freaking life. And because of that, from that one particular circumstance, and it was, I mean, it was awesome to experience that, and
awesome.
to give that opportunity, that gift to somebody. It just felt amazing, and I really, I was so happy to see that.
That's a great example of how, overcoming the fear helped her to change her life, quite
Yes.
literally her entire
Yes.
life for the better.
Yes.
Now I've got the flip side of that.
Mm.
At the Naval Academy, I can't remember if it's your junior or senior year, but you have to jump off of a 10-meter dive platform. You have to jump off of it.
Yeah.
Every single person that graduates from the Naval Academy has to jump off of it into the pool. And there was one of our classmates that had an irrational, not an irrational, that's a pretty good height to jump from, and there is an actual fear of pain, of hurting yourself, of even death from that height. There's a fear of it. The chance of that happening is pretty slim, but there's a fear of it. So it is a rational fear. But the whole point is for us to overcome that fear, to teach us how to overcome that fear. And this one classmate of ours was not able to overcome that fear, and she did not graduate. You do not graduate, even if you do everything academically, if you do everything physically, if you do everything, and you do not jump off of this 10-meter board, you do not graduate. And she did not. And that comes back to where I was starting to go just before you mentioned, the fear of. No, all good. But I'm sure, I haven't spoken with her since, but I'm sure that there is a sense of failure there, right? So she feels that she was a failure because she didn't jump off this 10-meter board. And that's where the fear of failure prevents you from doing something. And then you start to judge yourself as a failure. And it's the flip side of what you mentioned, Will, with your friend who jumped off the cliff in Guatemala, how she suddenly was confident and was able to overcome other fears, knock all these other fears down. Now this other individual that I'm talking about, who knows where she may have struggled in overcoming fears since then. Now, again, that's a single anecdote, and hopefully, since then she's overcome some other fears and has gone on to be a great success. But the point is that the fear of failure often causes us to not do something, and then we judge ourselves as failures for not doing that one thing. So it's kind of a ironic thing. But
I think it's also, let me just double on that, John, but also typically I would, in those circumstances, if you don't take that leap, right, figuratively and literally, then you're judging yourself, but you're always, that memory is there. And how much is that living right in all the other circumstances in your life where it's like, where the risk is there. I mean, this is like, risk and fear are very closely tied together. But the risk of the reward on the other side versus the risk and not taking the risk. And then what do? You just bury yourself into that emotional state, what in the yoga philosophy they call it becomes a sankara, right? So it becomes a rut, and you keep running through that rut, keep living through that rut, keep thinking through that rut, keep doing things in that rut, and you never are able to get out of that rut and see, the field of opportunity and everything that comes from taking that leap and taking that risk and getting on the other side of the fear, on the other side of the risk. And it really makes a big deal. Yeah, it makes a really
field of opportunity. You're not able to see that, and I love that.
No, you can't, because you're stuck. Yeah. You're stuck in a rut. The more that you, the more that you continually live through that rut of fear, it just gets deeper and more concrete, and it's much more difficult to get out of that. Because it really requires a lot more work. It requires a lot more support, but it's not impossible. But as time goes on, as we get older, I mean, literally they call it like sankara, because the mylar, I mean, I think sankara is an agrarian term that means rut. But when we, in the mind, right, when we keep moving through that rut and moving through the same neural networks in the brain, the mylar sheaths, which are like kind of the insulation around the nerves, if you will, just keeps getting stronger, thicker, and it's really hard. It's more challenging to access that neuroplasticity, right, which we talk about, in order to literally change the brain. So just to being aware of that, like if there's something out there, whoever's listening, that you need to do and you've been wanting to do, find a way to do it.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
or get support. Yeah.
let's talk about that. Let's talk about overcoming the fears so that you can, in fact, rewire your brain so that you can overcome other fears, knock down those other dominoes, knock down those other fears. And let's figure out what overcoming fear looks like, because that's, again, we've talked about this before on the show. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is having fear and doing something anyway, overcoming that fear. So let's talk about ways that we can do that. And Brian Ward here in the comments says it's helpful for me to talk those fears out loud. Others knowing the fears can help overcome them, and you have a sense of community. That's a great one. Speaking that fear out loud.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do, and we talked about this before, is fighting it. Like, hey, as you're walking up on stage, you start to get nervous. You're like, oh no, I'm getting nervous. Oh no, I've got to tense up. I got to fight this. I got to fight it. And then it just becomes worse. So one, don't fight it. Work to overcome it rather than fighting it.
Take action. Take action in the physical world instead of internally, fighting within, your mind and with your feelings in your mind. Like take action. That's like, I think that's a good point too. It's like, fear is in the mind and in the body, right? But like, to overcome it, you have to get into you have to take a step in the physical world with this,
right?
In order to prove to yourself, like, oh, I didn't die. I didn't completely embarrass myself. It's like, I might not have been perfect, but it still worked out.
Right.
And it's just like, and it only, it comes through action. It comes through action, not just the idea. And also Brian here, I thought was a really good example. What he mentions here about having a necessary conversation with his father. That he needs to have, wants to have. And he just even said, you guys are kind of making it a little easier to have amends with my dad. It's my fear of rejection, he says, or this reaction, or his reaction to my olive branch. And, I think it's like what's important also in this context, but, it's raining. I should probably close my windows, but fuck it, my plants will just get a little more water. Yes. Anyway, sorry. I'm just being in the moment, in the environment, John.
That's right. Don't fear the rain, man. Don't fear it.
Okay, fine. I fear staining my windowsills. Okay, I'm just kidding. But it's like coming from. There's something about speaking, living, and doing from your heart. Really apologizing if that's what you need to do. Or really standing up for yourself. We heard William last week stand up for himself when he wanted to be a SEAL. And there's something about broadcasting and living and speaking from the energy of the heart that just melts the environment, melts ourselves as human beings. I think it reminds us that we're all human instead of just like these computers of thought all the time. And who knows? I mean, and I'll tell you what, even if like, and Brian, even if your dad at the beginning is like resistant to the olive branch, by you taking action, and anyone in this circumstance, something like this, and speaking those words and speaking from your heart and really saying whatever is apologizing or whatever it is, like that's no longer with you as well. It's like you've taken that anxiety, that stress, that fear, and it's outside in the world. And heard and received and felt by somebody else. And then instead of it being like, oh, what if, and worried about rejection or failure or sounding perfect, you're just like, okay, I have results now. And what do I do with those results? And then I can take different action, new actions, by stepping into the arena, overcoming your fear and taking action. So it's there's that heart, John. And I'm so glad we had, my friend Dan St. Pierre from Hyperlight come on and talk about heartfulness, because, it's just like when you broadcast from the heart, like so much is forgiven, so much is received, so much is heard. Right. And I'm just getting kind of choked up talking about it, because it's so beautiful, and life becomes so much more simpler when you work from the heart, instead of like living in the fear of the mind. Right.
100%. Mm-hmm. And, coming back to what Brian mentioned, as far as ways to overcome, naming it, and figuring out that, and naming and addressing objectifying your fears.
Yes,
And
that's
then,
super key. Yes.
yeah. And then identifying it as a fear, and then kind of thinking through the scenario. What are you fearing? Are you fearing the most likely scenario? Like, okay, if you jump off a cliff and there's no water at the bottom of it, it's just rocks. You're fearing the most likely scenario that you're going to hurt yourself.
Oh,
Okay, that's
yeah.
the most likely scenario. But if you jump off like a 10-foot cliff, there's water at the bottom of it. The least likely scenario is that you're going to hurt yourself. The most likely scenario is that you're going to have fun. Which one are you fearing? You get on a plane. I know a lot of people have a fear of flying. What's the most likely scenario? How many airplanes fly every day and do not crash? And how few crash? The fear of flying is the fear of the least likely outcome. So just kind of try to rationalize it and be like, okay, what is the most likely and least likely? Which one is it that I'm fearing? And I'm a math guy, so I kind of break down things into percentages and what chances of, or the chances of something happening, and kind of breaking it down that way. Then physiologically, what can you do? We talked about breathing, regulating your breath. You're tapping into your parasympathetic nervous system by doing a slow, regular, rhythmic, even breath. As you do that more and more often, not the deep breath. Like a lot of people be like, hey, take a few deep breaths. Sure, a few deep breaths are going to help, but the regular, rhythmic, even breath is what's going to really help you to tap into that parasympathetic nervous system and really kind of change the way that you're feeling about something. And then facing fears regularly. You talked about your friend Stephanie, who jumped off the cliff. She faced a fear, and then that gave her the confidence to face another fear and overcome that, and face another fear and overcome that. If we face the fears regularly, we're going to have more confidence, and we're going to be able to overcome more fears. There's the quote, do one thing every day that scares you. And I know this quote has been misattributed to Eleanor Roosevelt, but it doesn't matter where it comes from. It's a powerful habit to get into. If we do something every day that fears, I mean, heck, doing this show right here every day, every time we do it live, there's a little bit of fear. Hey, is it going to be good? And then, hey, you know what? We find out, hey, our tech is flawed, or we said we flubbed on something, and it's okay. It's okay, because we're not perfect. So doing something every day that scares you, realizing that you're not going to be perfect, visualizing the opposite thing happening. So, if I come into the show and I visualize that I'm going to flub and I'm going to say the wrong thing, or our tech is going to suck, and then I flip that. If I visualize the opposite, I'm like, hey, you know what? This show is going to be awesome. We're gonna knock it out of the park. If I can visualize that, then that's going to also give me the confidence to overcome it. So those are some tools that we can use. What else? Will, what did I miss?
Well, no, I think it's like, it's funny when what you just talked about, as far as like, oh my God, I hope the technology doesn't do this, or I hope, I sound okay, and you're like living in the fear. You're almost prognosticating what will happen, because it's just funny how, like, the mind is so powerful, that, like, if we have all these thoughts and have all these fears, like some that stuff might really show up, versus like, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to flex and flow, with my boy John, and I'm just going to have a great show and have fun and be authentic and be vulnerable. And like, we're always like, I think, again, it's like, and I'd like to talk a little bit about military, John. It's like prepare, right? And you prepare, because when you step out onto the battlefield, you step into the arena, you step onto stage, you step into that meeting, you don't know what's going to happen, right? And the more prepared you are, right? And sometimes it would be, I did a lot of personal growth work through Momentum Education, which is kind of like Landmark Forum, and they had a recipe for having a difficult conversation. And one thing I would do in order to have that, I would first break it down, because it was like, I can't remember how many steps there were, maybe like 4 or 5. And it was good. It was like acknowledging the other person, acknowledging your feelings, but not saying you're feeling this way because that person made you feel. It's just a feeling, and really getting clear, but also, rehearsing that. Like, there's been times where I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to rehearse this conversation with like, a friend of mine. So when I do step into that place to have that difficult conversation, the heart rate's going up and I'm nervous. And I've done this many, many times, like, kind of making a request as well. It's like, hey, I want to do this and I need your help to do that. Is it possible? and that could be asking for a promotion or something like that, but even rehearsing and preparing and then stepping in there and asking, making that request. It's amazing what happens when you have the guts and the courage to step out. And typically another human being might be like, oh, well, shit, I didn't think you were going to ask me that. Like, oh yeah, you can definitely have that, just because of the sheer courage and the balls that you had in order to make that request.
Right.
Or at least you tried, and you can walk away, be like, oh, well, I tried, it didn't work out completely. And yeah, I might be a little upset, but like, I did it. Like that energy is no longer inside me. It's out here in the world, and it's not going to mess with my mind anymore. So
exactly. And I got to highlight some fun comments that are coming in here on our
Army,
YouTube
Navy
channel.
shit,
Yeah, of course. So,
Andy Rise, where are you, brother? You're gonna get crushed, dude.
That's
You're gonna
right,
get crushed.
Andy Reese, he's going down, man. So Brian had mentioned earlier in the comments that one of his biggest fears is that Army will lose to Navy. Mike came back. He said, you really just need to breathe through the inevitable fear when Army loses to Navy. And Brian came back again coming back to the stats and figures that I was talking about. If I go with the lower expectations and think through the most probable scenario, Army lost looking at the last 20 years, then anything other than that is a good day. So I love the fact that you guys are having fun in the comments. Love the engagement. Let's start to wrap it up here, brother. Cool. I think we're doing. We've done some good stuff here and talked about some good ways to overcome the fear, the irrational fears that we have, and what those irrational fears do to us. Any closing comments, and then we'll wrap it up with a closing and irrational fear overcoming meditation.
I think what I'll say in closing is, surround yourself with people that are risk takers. So surround yourself with people that are doing great things, that continually step forward and take action in the face of fear to do the things they want. Whether that's like, showing up at a workout, like, at early in the morning, or, trying to, do some sort of, physical, like personal record or something like that, or this could be in business, or this could be, in your relationships. It's like, fear, false evidence appearing real, FEAR. And if you scoff in the face of fear and step beyond fear, then who knows what's possible. One thing I'll say, John, that could be helpful for people that are struggling with fear is objectify it. I was watching some stuff earlier. It's like, give it a name.
Yep.
Instead of it being inside you, understand what that fear is, where that fear is, feel that fear, and then try to pull it out, give it a name, and be like, hey, like, you're not going to mess with me today. Or like, like if, you're not going to mess with me in whatever the circumstance is. It's like, no. It's like, hey, I see you over there. Like, and you got to acknowledge it. I mean, it's not just, don't hide from it, but acknowledge it, but don't let it mess with you. And you're going to develop a more holistic and empowering relationship to fear if you continually eat the frog every morning, meaning like, do the hard thing first, do the thing that, make that phone call, or whatever, send that email, and stand up for yourself. And when you're standing up for yourself, you're standing up for things that you believe in. You're probably, in a lot of those cases, standing for things that you love, things that you're passionate about. And again, broadcasting from that place of passion and heartfulness, and that authenticity and that vulnerability. It's something about those frequencies, John, something about those energies that is so deep in our human experience, that it just resonates with other people. And it's like that tuning fork analogy we've used before. It's like, if you're vulnerable, authentic, and courageous, it gives the other people the experience and the license to do the same. And then you just become like, what else can I do? What else can I do? Yep. And it's
powerful.
You can just you can become very, very powerful individual, working from that heart space and working from that passion.
So. You said something there that actually, real quick, I just want to touch on this.
No, yeah, man. Hey, I don't care. I got time, John.
Yeah. The eat that frog, right? And eat that frog is the kind of the modality, a method to stop from procrastinating, getting through something. Hey, do the hardest thing first thing in the day. That is something we didn't talk about in the show, is that fear often causes us to procrastinate. Because in the day we see a project that we have to do and we're like, oh man, I fear the effort that's going to go into that. And often if we just like, hey, you know what, it's just going to be some effort. I gotta put that effort forward. I actually end up getting that thing done. And normally it ends up not being near as big a deal as we thought it was. Again, that's our mind imagining that it's way more than it actually is. So there, fear can lead to procrastination on a daily basis, just being afraid of our biggest task of the day. So, tackling that biggest task head on at the beginning of the day really allows us to get more done, feel better about ourselves, and come full circle to feeling more fulfilled in our daily lives. So you mentioned that Eat the Frog. I just had to make sure
and it works both ways, John. Like you either, do the work, show up, feel the fear and do it anyway and keep going and going. And then you're just stacking up. You're just stacking up like wins, if you want to call them wins, whatever, like you just success, or like action, doing. Right. Versus like if I procrastinate on this thing, the likelihood of me procrastinating on my laundry or my dishes or, sending those emails, like that is much more likely. I guess kind of like attracts like, if you're just procrastinating and you're just gonna sit on a whole pile of shitty procrastination, that's gonna just hold you in space, right? Hold you in the same place. Versus doing action. Results and regardless of success, doesn't even matter. Success, failure, it's the same. It's results, right? Result, and then what are you doing with the results? And if you're taking bigger risks, taking bigger steps, you're gonna yield bigger results. You're gonna have a more resilient mindset. You're going to have more experience, and that experience is going to reward you again and again and again and again. And you're going to be more likely as well help other people, take that step and be more kind. Also, I think when people are a little bit more fearful because you've experienced fear, and you've been there, but also overcome. And that kindness is a big aspect. It's always going to reward you as well, just as much as
for sure.
That comes from the heartfulness as well too. So
for sure. Well, now I'm starting to have a fear that the show is running too long.
That's irrational, John.
It's totally irrational. It's totally but what is our audience going to think about us?
I think they love us, John. They keep commenting, and we're 107 minutes into the show.
That's right.
Or 107.
67. 67. All good. So, all right. Well, let's do our finishing grounding practice, kind of to put a bookend on the end of this show. And to allow us to go into our day feeling more confident, braver, less fearful than we came in. So let's do some of that breathing that we talked about, rhythmic and even breathing. So we're going to take a breath in for a count of 5, letting it go for a count of 6, a nice pause at the bottom. I'm going to do that 5 times. So letting it out all the way to begin. Deep breath in. Out. Holding at the bottom, empty. Deep breath in for 5. Out for 6. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Holding empty at the bottom. Deep breath in for 5. Letting it out for 6, nice and even. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Holding empty. Deep breath in for 5. Out for 6, nice and even. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Holding empty. And last one, in for 5. And out for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and empty. And now go ahead and start to bring some micro movement back into your body. And hopefully you will go about your day feeling more confident, braver, able to overcome your fears, whatever they may be, big or small. We hope that we've given you some tools. If you like the show, please share it with your friends, family, whoever else may be in need of hearing this. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and give it a like, hit that little bell so that you know when we release new shows, new episodes, and new little segments from the show. And again, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us here on video, or if you're listening in podcast form. Will, back over to you, brother.
Yeah, you sign up for the retreat. If you want to dive in a little bit more, find more of that courage, find more of the tools that give you that courage, that begin to identify more of your fears and step into that unknown and the field of all possibilities. Come join us in Durango, Colorado, September 16th and the 19th. mentalkingmindfulness.com/retreat.
Don't fear the retreat. Don't fear the retreat.
Yeah, mentalkingmindfulness.com/retreat. Yeah, be bold. Join us. If you have any questions about that, let us know. We really appreciate y'all being here and supporting the show. And please share, or a review. John, thank you. I thought it was a very solid show today.
Yeah,
and I thought we did it perfectly.
Perfect. It was absolutely perfect.
Be well, brother.
All right, guys.
And all you out there,
Until
peace.
next
Thank
time.
you.
Peace.
Joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.